The Devil's Violinist, Part 3. Chapter 17, Conductor of Souls. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. London wept as if trying to wash something from its bones, something buried beneath the streets, beneath the bricks, beneath the music. Lucien sat in the corner of his flat, wrapped in a threadbare coat, eyes bloodshot, violin resting across his knees like a sleeping weapon. He hadn't slept since the dream, since the concert of the dead, since the applause that echoed from behind the mirror. The manuscript now lay open at all times. It refused to be closed. Any attempt to shut it was met with a rush of hot wind or the sudden smell of burning paper. A living thing, now, like the violin, like the curse. But what unsettled him most were the new additions. He hadn't written them. And yet, the notations were in his hand. Dynamic markings, tempo shifts, and in the margins, faint red symbols, like names. One passage read, Legato, 3 bow strokes. Name, R. Caldwell. 72. Heart, peaceful. Decrescendo. Name, M. Fields. 38. Stroke. Sudden. Silence, 3 bars. Name, C. Sutherland. 5. Skip. Lucien stared at the list, horror sinking into him like cold water. It was a death chart. A score of souls, paired with their exits. He slammed the manuscript shut, heart pounding. But the violin pulsed in response. Warm. Ready. He hadn't agreed to the show. He didn't need to. The invitation had arrived wrapped in black ribbon and sealed in wax. No return address. But the money in his account had already appeared. The car was already waiting. Lucien sat backstage in the Cavendish Hall, an elegant, historic venue once used for royal recitals and funerals of the elite. The air smelled of lilies and old varnish. Outside the velvet curtain, the audience. Packed. They'd come for the haunted violinist, the cursed composer, the man who played people into the grave with beauty too heavy to survive. They whispered his name like a charm. But Lucien no longer played for them. He played through them. As he took the stage, he felt it again. That hum. That subtle vibration in the air that said something else was here. Something watching. Not the dead. Not yet. Something older. He didn't acknowledge the crowd. He didn't bow. He simply sat and played. The first note rang out with unnatural precision. The violin responded before he commanded it, the bow drawing itself along the strings like muscle memory possessed. The melody rose, a dark waltz with a heartbeat hidden underneath. Familiar. Terrifying. Lucien felt it in his bones. He was choosing. As his eyes scanned the crowd, they shimmered. Their faces blurred. Then resolved, each lit with a faint, spectral glow. Above every head, a number. A name. A cause. Lucien faltered. His hand shook. If he sustained a G sharp, a man in the second row would collapse. If he played a 3-note trill in a minor key, the woman in the back would never rise again. He stopped. The violin didn't. The bow dragged itself. The audience gasped. And Lucien knew the music had learned to feed without him. He reached to stop it, but the strings burned against his fingertips. They blistered and hissed. The bow spun upward, carved 3 harsh notes into the silence. And then, a man in the front row slumped forward. Painless. Silent. Gone. Lucien stopped playing. Silence fell. The crowd didn't scream. They stood. Applauded. Wept. One woman called out, "Take me next." Another, "Please. Let it be me." Lucien staggered back, horrified. They wanted it. Backstage, Lucien vomited into a sink. His reflection in the mirror stared back at him, but didn't move. It smiled. Behind him, on the vanity, lay the next page of the manuscript. A note was pinned to it, written in the same red ink. Conduct well. Your orchestra is growing. Lucien sank to the floor. The violin, resting on the chair, purred like a satisfied cat. And in the distance, a church bell rang 13 times. Chapter 18. Requiem for a Friend. It began with a letter. No wax seal this time. No black ribbon. Just plain white paper, smudged slightly by fingerprints and the faint scent of ink. Lucien found it tucked beneath his apartment door, half crumpled as though whoever delivered it had hesitated. Lucien, I saw your name in the news. I nearly didn't believe it. It's been years, but I'm still in the city. I'm still playing, though not on stages like yours. I heard you're performing at the Winterson Conservatory next week. That's poetic, isn't it? I'll be in the audience. I'd love to hear you again. If you remember me, come find me after. Julian. Lucien read the name again. Julian Farrow. His first roommate at the conservatory. A pianist. The kind of friend who gave up sleep to listen to Lucien practice, who knew how to keep quiet without vanishing. They'd lost touch years ago. Life had drawn its sharp lines, and Lucien had followed the one marked desperation. He hadn't thought of Julian in months. But now he couldn't think of anything else. Lucien hadn't stepped foot inside Winterson Hall since the day he'd left the conservatory. The building still smelled the same polish and mildew and forgotten ambition. The air was heavy with the weight of thousands of failed dreams. The performance was a tribute concert for the conservatory's anniversary. A celebration of alumni, some famous, some forgotten. Lucien had not agreed to perform. He didn't have to anymore. His name appeared anyway, and the audience packed the old wooden theater like they were waiting for resurrection. Fifth row. Same crooked smile. Hair grayer, shoulders thinner, but still Julian, alive in a way most people weren't. His eyes lit up when Lucien walked onto the stage. Lucien felt sick. He wanted to stop, to leave, to walk down into the audience and drag Julian out of there before anything could happen. But the violin was already in his hands, and it was already playing. Lucien didn't recognize the music. Not from the manuscript, not from memory. It was new, dissonant, haunting. Every note sounded like the first crack of grief. The audience fell under its spell. They leaned forward, open-mouthed. Some held hands. Some sobbed openly. One man covered his ears but still cried. Julian didn't cry. He simply watched. Lucien's eyes kept flicking to him over and over until he saw it. The glow. Faint, red, flickering like the halo of a candle burning low. Hovering above Julian's chest. Lucien gasped mid-phrase. No. Not him. Not him. He pulled the bow back. The violin screamed in protest. The crowd flinched. A light shattered above. Lucien dropped the bow. But the strings kept vibrating. They moved on their own. The melody continued. A death march in a major key. He staggered to the edge of the stage, trying to shout Julian. Leave. Get out. But the words came out as music. Twisted, mournful, helpless. Julian smiled up at him. And then, very gently, closed his eyes. He slumped sideways in his chair. No sound. No struggle. A faint sigh, like a leaf falling into still water. Lucien stood paralyzed. All around him, the audience wept. The applause came slowly. Softly. But it came. Lucien sat alone in the dressing room, the violin in his lap. His hands were covered in blood, though his skin was uncut. He wasn't sure if it was his or Julian's or something else's. There was no knock at the door. No letter waiting. Only the manuscript. The page had turned again. At the top, scrawled in bold black ink, was a new title. Requiem for a Friend. For those who stay too long. Lucien tore the page from the manuscript and set it on fire. It refused to burn. He tried again. It turned black, curled at the edges, and then reformed itself in perfect condition. The music was eternal now. It wanted the people he loved. And next time, it would not ask. Chapter 19. The Devil's Score. The rain stopped. For the first time in weeks, the skies above London cleared, but the silence it left behind was heavier than any storm. Lucien stood at his window, watching the street below, not blinking. His hands had not touched the violin since Julian's death. They wouldn't stop shaking. He hadn't cried. Not because the grief wasn't there, but because something inside him had gone quiet. Too quiet. The manuscript remained open on his desk, but untouched. Until now. That morning, he woke with a compulsion he couldn't name. A whisper behind his eyes. A pressure in his chest. He opened the manuscript and found a page he had never seen before. A hidden fold within the back binding. So delicately sewn into the spine, he might never have found it if not for the subtle warmth pulsing from beneath the page, like a heartbeat waiting to be born. Lucien pried the binding loose. The page slid free. On it, a single passage written in elegant, archaic Latin. But this time, no notation. No tempo. No notes. Only a confession. Vanetti's final words. He took it to Madeline Cross. She hadn't heard from him since the early days, and she looked older now, worn by fear, by knowledge. But she took the page without question, as if expecting it. They sat in silence beneath the flickering lights of her office. She translated aloud, slowly. To the one who finds this, I was not the first. I will not be the last. I was a composer. I sought sound so pure it could reach the dead. I succeeded. The instrument is not cursed. It is a gate. Each performance opens it wider. Each death feeds the key. Asterisk. Asterisk, when the 13th piece is played, the veil will part fully. The audience will rise. The conductor will fall. And in his final note, a new maestro shall be chosen. Asterisk. Madeline stopped. Lucien's voice was barely a whisper. The conductor? False? She looked up at him. It's not just music. It's a ritual. Every time you play, the door opens a little more. And when it opens fully... She didn't finish. Lucien already understood. The violin wasn't made to kill. It was made to prepare the world for something waiting behind the silence. Lucien returned to his flat to find the ledger open. The black book of violinists before him. Dozens of names. Each crossed out, one by one. But now, a new page had appeared, clean, white, blank, waiting. At the top, already written. Final performance. You. Beneath it, in shimmering silver ink. The Devil's Score. He opened the violin case. Inside was a new bell. Longer. Strung with pure white hair. And still warm. Lucien played nothing. He sat in silence, staring at the sheet that had appeared beside the bell. The final composition. It had no time signature. No ending bar. The title at the top shimmered with a script not made for human eyes. He could not read it. But he understood it. This was the piece meant to open the gate. The 13th performance. The true Devil's Score. The one that would burn him alive and birth something else in his place. Lucien wept then, for the first time since Julian. Not for his death, but for the truth. This had never been about him. He was not chosen. He was summoned. A vessel. A voice box. The 13th key in a composition begun centuries ago by Venetti and passed from hand to trembling hand. And now the music wanted to finish itself. Chapter 20. No more encores. Lucien ran. Not from a person. Not even from the music. But from what he'd become. He left the violin behind. Locked it in its case. Sealed it with chains, poured wax over the clasps, wrapped it in linen soaked with holy water, and buried it beneath the floorboards. Then he packed a bag with only what he could carry, took the first train out of the city, and vanished. He slept in strangers' attics. He used a different name. He carried no phone, no instruments, no pens. And still, the music followed. He'd wake in the middle of the night to a humming beneath the bed. Children on the street would whistle the first 4 notes of the requiem for a friend without knowing why. A blind man on a bus turned toward him and whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped. They're getting impatient." Lucien covered his ears. But even then, he could hear it. The strings. Vibrating. Humming. Growing louder. On the morning of the 4th day, he found it tucked inside his coat. He hadn't brought it with him. He hadn't packed it. And yet, there it was. Black paper. Silver ink. Perfect handwriting. Mr. Marlowe, you have been cordially invited to your final performance. The phantom stage awaits. Curtain at midnight. The audience is already seated. L. He dropped the letter as if it burned him. Because it did. His fingertips blistered just from touching it. And deep inside his chest, something pulsed. One string had already returned. He didn't remember traveling there. Not really. Just flickers of motion. Train windows turning black. Alleys without doors, cobblestones that echoed with invisible footsteps. At midnight, Lucien stood before a building that didn't exist on any map. It was once an opera house. Long condemned. Covered in ivy. Its sign shattered. The Orpheum Theater. He felt it before he entered. That unbearable pressure in the air. The silence, thick and holy. The sense that time had folded inward around this place and was holding its breath. He pushed the door open. No lights. No ushers. No sound. Only the creak of the old velvet curtain swaying slightly on a breeze that didn't exist. The house was full. Packed. But not alive. The audience was still. Rows upon rows of people, dressed in black, eyes open, faces pale, unmoving. Lucien walked down the aisle, shaking. He recognized them all. Lady Ainsley. Julian. Elias Morvan. Clara. His mother. Dozens of those who had died during his music. And hundreds more he had never seen but somehow remembered. They were his orchestra now. Waiting. On the stage sat a single chair, a music stand. In the violin, no case, no wax, no chains. Perfectly tuned, glowing faintly red in the darkness. Lucien stepped toward it, weeping. He didn't want to play, but his hands lifted the instrument anyway, like a marionette on the final string. And from the shadows of the wings, a man in velvet emerged. Lorne, smiling, clapping once, softly. "Welcome home, maestro." Lucien's voice cracked. "I never wanted this." Lorne raised a brow. "Every note you played said otherwise." Lucien looked out at the audience. The dead stared back. No fear, no hatred, only hunger. On the music stand was the score. The devil's score. Blank, but only to the eye. Lucien could feel it written into his blood, into his fingers. The 13th piece. The one Venetti never finished. The one meant to open the gate. Lorne stepped forward and whispered in Lucien's ear. "This is the part where you choose. Play the final piece, and the door opens. You ascend. The world shifts. Or refuse. And you burn with the silence you tried to tame." Lucien stood frozen, violin in hand, bow trembling. The audience leaned forward in perfect unison. Waiting. Chapter 21. The Phantom Stage. The silence was thick enough to taste. Lucien stood center stage beneath the yawning dome of the ruined opera house, the violin trembling in his hands. The glow from the instrument had grown stronger now, no longer red, but a sickly gold, like candlelight behind old bone. The audience remained still. Hundreds of them. Some barely more than shadows in mourning clothes. Others pristine as portraits. And a few, Julian, Clara, his mother, sat in the front row, faces neither joyful nor angry, only expectant. Lorne stood at the edge of the wings, hands clasped neatly behind his back. He said nothing now. He didn't need to. The violin spoke for him. It wanted to begin. And Lucien could no longer deny it. He raised the bow. His fingers gripped the neck of the instrument. The moment the bow touched the strings, the opera house seemed to breathe in, walls pulsing, curtains shuddering, dust trembling midair like suspended ash. Lucien played the first note. A single, low tone, drawn slow, mournful, impossibly rich. It resonated through the theater like a bell struck inside the chest of God. The audience exhaled as one. The chandeliers flickered to life, though no electricity ran through the building. The marble cracked. The shadows deepened. And the music continued. As Lucien moved into the second phrase, the world began to shift. Not visibly, not all at once, but subtly. The ceiling arched higher than it had moments ago. The stage beneath him grew colder. The floorboards moaned with every note, as if crying out from beneath the weight of centuries. In the air tasted of iron. He could feel the audience inside him. Their memories. Their deaths. Each one stitched to a string. Each note a requiem, each pause a whispered yes. A wind moved through the seats, though the doors were shut. The music grew darker, more dissonant. Lucien's arms ached. He tried to stop, but his fingers were no longer his own. The violin was using him. The bow danced like a limb possessed. He was a puppet now, and the composer was something far older than Venetti. Above the stage, hidden for decades behind old velvet drapes, a mirror once used by lighting technicians now pulsed with light. It began to glow, then open, not like glass cracking, but like skin parting. Lucien saw something beyond it. A dark field, endless and empty, filled with music that moved like wind across bones. In the distance, shapes circled, too tall, too thin, cloaked in robes of smoke. He felt their eyes. They were listening, and they were getting closer. The audience did not move, but their shadows did. One by one, shadows stood, stretched, walked away from their seated bodies, and began to climb the walls. They filled the balconies, hung from the ceilings, peered from the cracks. Dozens, hundreds, all watching him. Lucien's bow hand burned. His fingertips bled. The strings wept with every stroke. But the music surged onward. He was halfway through the devil's score now. The theater had tripled in size. The ceiling had vanished. Above him now, only void. And from the void came whispers. A chorus of languages long dead. In the front row, Clara raised her hand. Her blind, silver eyes had opened, glowing now with molten white. She whispered a single word. Stop. Lucien's heart seized. That one word, spoken with such clarity, broke the tempo. The violin faltered. The bow dropped. The music stopped. Everything stopped. The audience gasped in a single, rotting voice. The mirror above the stage shuddered. The cracks reversed. The wound began to close. Lucien collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Lorne appeared beside him. Not walking. Formed from the shadows. He looked disappointed. You were nearly perfect. Lucien looked up, voice cracking. I didn't finish. Lorne knelt beside him, smiling gently. Not yet. But the gate remembers the song. And it's hungry now. Lucien's hands trembled. He looked at the audience. Some had begun to vanish, melting back into dust, into memory. But others remained. Especially Julian. Especially Clara. Especially his mother. Lorne stood. One more performance. One more note. The encore. We'll try again soon. He vanished into smoke. And Lucien was left kneeling on a stage soaked in his own blood, holding a violin that now thrummed with a sound no one alive should hear. Chapter 22. Encore is forever. Lucien awoke on the floor of his apartment. His clothes were soaked with cold sweat. His ears rang with aftertones. The violin lay inches from his face, humming faintly, still warm, as if freshly played. And on the floor beside him was a letter. Not sealed. Not signed. Only 2 words, written in jagged black ink, finale scheduled. He sat up slowly. His hands were blistered. His shirt was torn. But the room, his apartment, was whole again. No crack in the mirror. No fire on the floor. No howling shadows. Had it all been a dream? No. It had been the dress rehearsal. And now, the real performance was coming. The letter contained an address and a date. 3 nights from now. The Nightingale Hall. An infamous venue known for its acoustics and its tragedies. A fire had once gutted its interior, killing dozens during a symphonic premiere. Rumors said the final chords still echoed in the rafters. The audience list was enclosed. Lucien read it. And his heart shattered. Clara Farrow. Dr. Madeline Cross. The Ainsley estate. His childhood music teacher. Julian's younger brother. His mother's former caretaker. His own name. Each name followed by a phrase, attending, bound, listening. Lucien turned the page over and found one final line. Play the encore, and they live. Refuse it, and they all take your place. His breath caught. It wasn't a choice. It was an execution. He tried to find Clara. Her phone rang endlessly. Her apartment was empty. Her building's super said she'd been taken by a man in a long black coat who smelled like winter. He ran to Madeline's office. The door had been kicked in. Inside, everything was gone, bookshelves empty, chalkboard erased, manuscript torn from its frame and burned into the carpet. But a single Polaroid photo remained, pinned to the wall with a bowstring. It showed Madeline, blindfolded, seated in the front row of Nightingale Hall, smiling faintly. Lucien left London. He walked, rode trains, crossed borders. He didn't pack. He didn't sleep. But each time he reached a city, the posters were already there. The Devil's Violinist. Encore performance. One night only. The piece that will silence the soul. Or set it free. The posters showed his face, cracked like porcelain, bow mid-stroke, fire curling from the strings. No one had taken this photograph. And yet, it was perfect. He tore them all down. It didn't matter. By morning, they returned. The night before the performance, Lucien returned to his apartment one last time. He didn't know why. Perhaps to remember who he was before all this. The lights flickered as he entered. The mirror on the wall, once covered, now stood uncovered and clean. His reflection was already waiting. It stared back at him and smiled. Then it raised its violin and began to play. The room shuddered. The floorboards curled. And Lucien heard the final melody forming in his mind. It was beautiful. And it would end the world. Lorne was waiting in the kitchen, drinking tea, wearing white. Lucien didn't flinch. Lorne placed the cup down and spoke calmly, almost gently. The door is open just enough. The encore will push it wide. The audience is gathered. The ink is dry. Play, and they live. Refuse, and you'll have to choose which one dies first. Lucien said nothing. Lorne stood, brushing non-existent dust from his coat. The devil never asked you to play. You wanted to be heard. Now you will be remembered. He vanished in smoke, leaving behind only a sealed envelope on the table. Lucien opened it. Inside was a single ticket. Gold foil. silver print. Box seat, Nightingale Hall, encore. And on the back, bring the violin. Leave the soul. Lucien sat down. The violin case pulsed softly from across the room. 3 strings now glowed white. The 4th was turning. Chapter 23. The Violinist Must Die. Nightingale Hall rose from the earth like a cathedral built for requiems. Its scorched stone facade still bore the scars of its infamous fire, ornate columns blackened by soot, windows bricked over to keep out whatever had once tried to burn its way in. A single red curtain hung above the entrance, motionless in the wind. Lucien stood across the street, violin case in hand, staring at the building like it might breathe. The final performance was tomorrow night. But already, something in the air had shifted. The world around him felt thinner, more fragile, as if the veil between reality and that mirror sky realm was stretching tighter with every breath he took. Inside Nightingale Hall, the stage was already prepared. The air was cold and dry. The theater smelled of wax, charred wood, and lavender, like a room prepped for burial. The piano keys were dustless. The strings of the old harp vibrated faintly without touch. On every seat in the audience was a folded black program, each stamped with the sigil of the spiral and eye. Lucien opened one. Inside, The Devil's Score, encore. Composed by the hand that plays. One movement, one musician, one door. No intermission, no return. He wasn't alone in the theater. He felt it the moment he stepped on stage. From the shadows beneath the balcony came a whisper, not the dead ones, not the ones waiting, but a voice alive and angry. You shouldn't be here. Lucien turned sharply. A figure stepped forward. Female. Young, but with something ancient in her stance. Clara. She was pale, eyes no longer blind, now glowing faintly with silver. He rushed toward her, relief choking him. Clara, how? I thought they took me, she said. But I escaped. Escaped. His voice was cracked with disbelief. Not from them, she whispered. From you. Lucien flinched. You were kind once, she said. You played for love. For wonder. But now your music is a knife. I didn't ask for this, he snapped. No, Clara replied. But you never turned away either. Lucien shook his head, trembling. I tried to stop. I tried to burn it. Clara stepped closer, pulling something from her coat. A dagger. Black. Ornate. Its blade etched with runes that shimmered red under the theater lights. I found this in Elias Morven's archive, she said. It was made by the first who tried to stop the encore. Lucien's eyes widened. What does it do? It doesn't kill the violin, she said quietly. It kills the violinist. Silence rang between them. The dagger gleamed between them like an unspoken answer. I don't want to die, Lucien said. You've already died, Clara whispered. Bit by bit. With every note. He looked down at his hands. The veins were darker now. The fingers too thin, the skin too pale. The 4th string on the violin had turned completely white. Only one left. I can end it, she said. Now. Before the last string breaks. Before the gate opens. Before you're no longer Lucien. Tears filled his eyes. Not from fear. From clarity. From knowing that she was right. And from knowing he didn't want her to do it. I need to see it through, he said. If I play, I might still choose how it ends. Clara stared at him for a long time. Then she held out the dagger. Then take it. In case you change your mind. Lucien took it. The moment his hand closed around the hilt, a searing pain lanced up his arm, and the violin case shuddered violently. From inside, the final string snapped itself into place. White-hot. Glowing. Ready. And in the silence that followed, Lucien heard the sound of footsteps above the ceiling. Not human. Not welcome. The audience was arriving early. Lucien sat in the balcony, dagger beside him, the manuscript open across his lap. He didn't sleep. He listened. To the whisper of strings in the rafters. To the hiss of breath behind the curtains. To the heartbeat of a world on the verge of tearing open. Tomorrow, the encore would begin. And the choice would no longer be his alone. Chapter 24. The final curtain rises. Nightingale Hall breathed like a thing alive. At first, the building had seemed dormant, an old venue waiting for ghosts. But as the final night fell and the city sank into twilight, the theater awoke. The floorboards stretched and sighed. The chandeliers trembled in their chains. And from somewhere deep beneath the stage, a low, pulsing drone hummed up through the walls like a buried organ warming up for mass. Lucien arrived an hour before midnight, dressed in black, the violin in its case slung over his shoulder. The dagger Clara had given him was tucked into the inner lining of his coat, close to the heart. He paused before the great iron doors. Above them, the banner read simply, Encore. Nothing more. Inside, the hall was full. Every seat taken. Every face blank. They didn't breathe. They didn't blink. But they listened. Some wore opera finery. Some wore modern clothes, what with ash and dirt. And some were clearly not human anymore, faceless silhouettes dressed in what could only be described as memory, cloaked in the echo of who they once were. Lucien recognized many of them. Julian, Lady Ainsley, his mother, Madeline, even Clara, though she had promised to flee, sat in the second row, her eyes closed, tears tracking down her cheeks. And in the back row stood Lorne, tall, serene, wearing white gloves, hands clasped before him, smiling. The lights dimmed on their own. The violin rested on a black velvet stool. The music stand was bare, no sheet music, no manuscript. Because the final piece was inside him now, burned into blood, etched into bone. Lucien stepped on stage. The world stopped. The air stiffened. And above the audience, the ceiling of Nightingale Hall, once carved in gold leaf and cherubs, had become mirror glass. Not reflective. Watching. And behind that glass? The gate. Lucien raised the violin. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Then he drew the bow. One note. Deep. Low. Eroded by time. It fell into the room like a stone into black water. And the audience inhaled all at once. Lucien played on. The melody emerged from him like something ancient clawing its way out of the grave. It was grief. It was birth. It was the sound of time folding, the sound of light dying behind closed eyelids. Each note tore a thread in the ceiling above. Cracks began to spider across the mirrored sky. From those cracks, light spilled downward, but not golden. Pale. Cold. Like bone soaked in starlight. And behind it, voices. Not screams. Singing. Lucien faltered. For a split second, he felt himself again. He looked down at the dagger in his coat. His breath caught. He could end it. He could end everything. In the front row, Clara opened her eyes. Their silver glow met his. She did not speak. She did not beg. She simply shook her head. Once. Lucien's hand hovered above the strings. And then, from the wings, Lorne stepped forward. He walked silently to the edge of the stage and said, "It's almost done. Just one more phrase, and you'll be free." Lucien turned his head slowly, stared into Lorne's eyes, and whispered, "No." Lucien dropped the bow. The sound cut instantly, like a scream silenced mid-breath. He grabbed the dagger from his coat. Lorne's eyes widened. A flicker of fear. Lucien turned the dagger, not outward, but inward, pressed it against his chest, and plunged it in. The moment the blade pierced skin, the violin screamed. Not a note. A howl. The strings burst into flame. The mirror above shattered inward, not glass, but a sky tearing itself apart. And from behind it, a roar. 1,000 voices shrieking in unison. The gate had been starved, and Lucien had become the lock. The stage erupted in light. The audience stood, not rising, but ascending, their forms unraveling into ash and music and silence. Julian smiled at him one last time. Clara mouthed a word he didn't hear. And Lorne burned, his white gloves curling into ash, his face melting into smoke and memory, reaching toward Lucien as if trying to grab the soul slipping from his hands. Lucien fell to his knees. The violin burst into white flame and vanished. And then silence. The final curtain. Chapter 25. The conductor's silence. There was no encore. No curtain call. No applause. Only silence. And then, a single note, trembling on the edge of time, unplayed. When the fire brigade reached Nightingale Hall the following morning, they found nothing but ash. The entire theater had collapsed inward. No signs of flame, no heat, no rubble. Just dust. Pale, bone-like, scattered across the lot like snow fallen from a darker sky. There were no bodies. Not one. No bones. No seats. No violin. Not even the stage remained. Only a burn mark, shaped like a music stand and a chair. And etched into the floor, untouched by dust or wind, a single phrase. Encore is silence. A violin surfaced in a Paris antique store. Blackwood. Silver fittings. the fifth string still faintly glowing. But no matter how many times the shopkeeper tried to tune it, it never played a sound. And when he left the shop after dark, he swore he could hear it humming, just behind the locked door. He sold it a week later, to a child. The child never spoke again, but she began to draw. Pictures of a man on fire, a mirror in the sky, a room full of people smiling without eyes. In a seaside town no one remembers, a woman walks the cliff edge each morning before sunrise. She carries no cane anymore. Her silver eyes are calm, though tired. Her name is Clara Farrow. She says nothing of what happened. She no longer dreams in sound, only in echoes. But sometimes, when the wind moves just right across the sea, she swears she hears a melody, not from a violin, but from silence itself. And when she closes her eyes, she sees him standing in the distance, back turned, bow in hand. Not playing, just listening. Beneath stone, beneath silence, beneath the last note unplayed, lies a single page, the final page of the Devil's Score. Unwritten, waiting, and on its margin, in ink that breathes, a question. Who will be next to hear the music? The story may end here, but the darkness never sleeps. Like this video to keep the shadows stirring. Share your whispers in the comments. Your voice shapes the next nightmare. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Gothic Hour Stories and Mysteries, where every tale lingers and every soul leaves a mark. The Gothic Hour awaits.